Hello, guys, and welcome to the final installment of the Nathaniel Ahart and Company's top 100 albums of all time. With me today, I have my best friend, Mr. Zach Burdick here, and also, finally, for the first time, the legendary Mr. Johnny Radio himself, Mr. John Stanek. Dude, I'm so happy to have you on here today.
Oh, dude, it's an honor, man. I've really enjoyed the hell out of this top 100 so far, and I've loved getting to know you through your comments on my channel, and then through our chats on Instagram, and now here we are, man. That's start of something beautiful.
That's what I would like to say. A long time coming.
Absolutely.
So glad to have you this final episode. Obviously, had to go big for this one. No question about it. I was like, this list, it's been so much fun making it. Besides, a couple of picks here and there I don't necessarily agree with. It's just been so much fun doing this and just trying to get the channel up and going, and getting everybody's list, kind of running it down, putting the numbers in. So yeah, I mean, this is just, such a great honor that we're here. And yeah, I can't wait to get into this. Now, a couple things I want to mention before going into these 10 albums, because I do have to elaborate a little bit. All these albums, there are 27 people who voted on this list that I got lists from, right? All 10 of these were on 10 or more lists. So not only do they have that, but some of these points were just so close, at least kind of like near the bottom of the top 10. It was very neck and neck for a few of these albums, especially numbers, let's see, 8, 6, and 7, or 8, 7, and 6. So yeah, so it's been very close. And I mean, I think most, these records are just, I think, all-time classics, so iconic in their own right. And just before we get into it, I'm gonna, if this will narrow it down a little bit, I know you haven't heard the bottom two, but I know you have. So let's get into it.
Sweet. Let's do it.
All right. At number 10, we have. Can you see the screen?
I see it.
At number 10, we have the Miles Davis classic, Kind of Blue from 1959. Yeah, you know what? I was really surprised this one made it this high, but not really on the same token, because you know how acclaimed this record is. It's probably the most acclaimed jazz record of all time when you really think about it. And I mean, really a pivotal point and turning point in not only jazz but just in music in general, because you had like hard bop before that, where it was more like structured and whatever, and then you get Miles Davis coming in here and experimenting with modal music, which really hadn't been done before in jazz, and you'd think that it should have been done sooner, honestly, right? Because it's such a, jazz is such a free form to begin with. So you get Miles Davis coming in here, especially the title track, So What, which you hear that opening riff, and I mean, you know what it is immediately. It was viewed very well in the movie Pleasantville, and I recognized it like right off the bat. And it's just, I mean, you look at the band here, I mean, he had Coltrane on there. I mean, just the legendary John Coltrane and so many other great musicians. But the music here, because the thing for me is like, this is probably more a subjective thing than objective, because you look at my rating there. Obviously, I do love the album, but, when it comes to like this sort of stuff, I like to have, I like more compartmentalized jazz. But obviously, all the songs on here are great in some form or another. Every soloist gets a moment to shine. And really, I mean, once you get to the last track on here, Flamenco Sketches, I think that's like the best piece in modal jazz, if you ask me. And just the way the bass dictates the movement of the entire band, it just shows you how tight they were playing together. And I mean, really, as I said, what a turning point in jazz, because this was so influential in so many ways, and is still heralded to this day as one of the greatest albums of all time, and rightfully so.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, jazz was never the same after that. And,
right.
For me personally, probably like you too, it took me a while to even get into jazz. like I heard some things here and there, but I was more always of a rock guy, stuff with lyrics. But this was my kind of my introduction properly into jazz, and I think it's a great record to do that. Like if you are new to jazz, because it has a little bit of that like best of both worlds. Like you said, it was something totally new in that it felt more freeform, which it was. There was a lot of improvisation by everybody on there. They just kind of had little sketches of what he wanted to have done, Miles, and then Coltrane, all the other guys just kind of bounced off of that and created some of the most beautiful music. And it's also very concise. It's not too long of an album, and it never feels like it goes into like crazy territory like some of I wouldn't say like Coltrane's A Love Supreme would be a good album to start with if you're getting into jazz, something like that. This one feels both I guess kind of like something anybody that loves music could get into, especially that, the so what, it's just so cool, man. It's brilliant.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, man, you got to listen to this record because
no, I haven't listened to this yet. I haven't really listened to like any jazz music in general yet, but I know how highly acclaimed this record is. And obviously people seem to love it a lot because there it is at number 10. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Definitely got to check this out.
It's a great place to start, man.
Yeah.
And you might see it behind me on my wall of perfect albums, actually. I give it a 10 out of 10. So there you go.
But yeah, I mean, absolutely, even though not necessarily quite my personal favorite, I absolutely respect it at this spot. I get the acclaim behind it, and just a great record. I mean, I love this album regardless. So that's at number 10. And now at number 9, we have, let me click on the screen. Rumors by Fleetwood Mac. Yeah, you were guessing this one was on the list.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, talk about classic. I mean, just look at that album cover. It's on so many t-shirts. It's on so many posters. Everybody knows this. Especially last year with the whole TikTok thing with Dreams, which I mean, everyone should know that song anyway. But really, I mean, what an iconic record, and just the story behind this album being made is just absolutely insane. Like everything going on in the band with Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks breaking up, and then John McVie and Christine McVie getting divorced, and then Stevie Nicks hooking up with Mick Fleetwood, and then everybody like not talking to each other in the studio, and then all the cocaine that was going on. It was just absolutely nuts. The fact that this album came out is so cohesive and so concise as it does, and just the songs themselves are so like almost every single song on here is iconic. I think my biggest problem with this album is I like the last couple songs, but I think that it's a weak way to end the album because everything that came before it, I just think is absolutely amazing. Even the opening track, Secondhand News, with that you get that amazing guitar riff. And I mean, Lindsey Buckingham is, I wouldn't necessarily say he's an underrated guitarist, but I don't think he gets talked enough when you talk about the all-time greats, and he absolutely deserves to be there, especially he's finger picking too. So you have that, and the great thing is, I mean, you have 3 songwriters in this band, primary songwriters with Stevie Nicks, Lindsey Buckingham, and Christine McVie. And obviously I would have to say Stevie Nicks is the best out of all of them, and just, I mean, especially from Dreams alone. But there's so many great songs on here, and other great songs from like Lindsey Buckingham, like Never Going Back Again, with that amazing acoustic playing. And then of course you have Go Your Own Way, which is a classic, and you can go your own way, everybody knows that. And then of course you got like Don't Stop, which is a great song from Christine McVie. And then of course You Make Lovin' Fun, which is another one. When I first listened to this album, I was like, oh, I've heard this song before, that wonderful chorus that you got on there. I mean, really, all the turmoil in this band, it's just so crazy that they created something with such a powerful legacy. And the music, I mean, obviously this music has endured the test of time. And I think as of late, a lot of people in our generation specifically have kind of gravitated towards Fleetwood Mac over some other groups from that time period. But you know, this was, you know, fairly high on my list. It's just an absolute classic. I mean, come on, it's Rumors by Fleetwood Mac. Like, what else do you have to say about this album?
Exactly, man. I mean, just you nailed it. And so many amazing songs. The Chain also is on here. And my God, I mean, just Dreams and The Chain alone is enough to make this a classic. But then, you know, as well as with the opener, isn't the last song, is it Gold Dust Woman?
Yeah, Gold Dust Woman. Yep.
Yeah, I know you said like you thought it ended a little weak, but that's actually one of my favorites as well.
Okay.
I just think, yeah, the whole thing is magnificent. And like you said, I mean, so many songwriters in this band, and you know, the three-way harmonies, like other than, you know, the Beatles, and there's only like a handful of bands like the Beatles, the Band, the Bee Gees, and maybe Fleetwood Mac that really stand out to me. Oh yeah, well, yeah. There you go. That could be a good top 10 one day, but
right.
But yeah, man, I mean, and yeah, Lindsey Buckingham's guitar playing, you're right. I mean, he's very underrated. In that regard, he's almost like a Pete Townsend, because
right,
he's rhythm and lead at the same time and excels at both. Just incredible. And Go Your Own Way, man, that solo he does at the end is just nuts. So yeah, this is a great choice. I forgot all about it somehow. Like it wasn't one of my guesses, but that makes perfect sense. It's a great spot for it.
Absolutely. And you know, another thing, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I was trying to get the words out there. But yeah, The Chain is my favorite song off this whole album. I'd be remiss not to mention how great it is, and kind of like their ultimate statement, because all of them have co-writing credit on it, and there's all just everything. The chains keep us together, you know, like it's talking about all their trials and tribulations, and yet they're able to bang out this masterpiece, and so many individual ones on this record. I mean, really one of the most iconic albums of all time. And yeah, I think it is at a good spot, honestly.
Yeah.
So
great.
With that being said, we're going to move on to number 8. And number 8 is To Pimp a Butterfly by Kendrick Lamar. Man, I've got a lot of things to say about this record, because this one, I listened to it a few years ago. I try to get into albums. And I was like, I'll start with Kendrick. And I was just kind of listening and doing work. I never really focused on it because I didn't really know how to appreciate the album format. I didn't even listen to Beatles albums at this point. So I thought it was really good. But when it came a couple, well, actually not a couple years ago, it was last year. I was like, I gotta go through Kendrick's discography. I started with his debut album, then went to Good Kid in Mad City, and then I went to this. And I was just sitting there one night, and a lot of stuff was going on, especially politically at that time. And I kind of had like my own thing going on with that on Facebook, as you know, that happens from time to time. And I was listening to this record, and just everything I was feeling too was just so articulated on here by Kendrick. And I think just the amount of, like, this is the thing about this album. Sonically, it isn't necessarily like my favorite album of all time. But if we're talking about like conceptually, I would say this even kicks Dark Side of the Moon's ass. I'm going to be honest. I mean, this album is so concise. The way he put this together, especially that whole thing where he's ends each, well, not every song, but like he'll end certain songs and, you know, have kind of this poem that he's like building throughout the entire album, and how every time he ends the poem, it leads into the themes of the next song. I mean, nobody's ever done anything like that. And just, it really is such a triumphant journey of self-discovery and what it means to be a Black man in the USA, and what it means to your community. And obviously you have so many great songs in here. Like, I think King Kunta has one of the catchiest hooks. I'm sure you would agree with me. It's definitely. It just, and the beat on that is just so fat. And you know, there's so many great things about this album. Also, his use of double entendres, especially on the song for free, which he's just rapping his ass off. It is unbelievable how many words he's able to get out in like the span of like 2 minutes, and yet convey so much meaning through them. I mean, this is not just like some hip hop record you throw on and they're like talking about some crazy stuff that no one really understands. Like he's really, you're very astute in his observations and his criticism. And then you get songs like You, which I mean is probably his most personal song, and really just when he's like almost breaking down, crying, kind of blaming himself for what happened to one of his friends. You can feel like his raw emotion just pouring out on this track. And of course you have songs like All Right, which is kind of like, you know, this day and age is it's a new civil rights anthem, which is just, you know, for this day and age, it's just crazy to have something that powerful and translated across so well. But man, the way this album builds and builds and builds and builds, once you get to the last track, Mortal Man, which I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't listened to it, but what he's able to put together is probably one of the greatest feats in editing in music. And even though this album came out like 6 years ago, I see this at number 8, and I completely understand, because it's just one of those records that came out and everyone was like, yeah, I mean, this is just amazing. And so I don't mean to put anybody on the spot here, but with all due respect, I must ask, how do you not like this album? I gotta ask, man.
That's great. Yeah, you know, so off the bat, I do need to give it another chance.
Okay.
Kendrick, to me, like, there's no doubt the guy's talent is just off the roof, amazing. But to me, like, I grew up with early 90s hip hop. And, you know, just kind of like fun, upbeat music that was more, I don't know. You can't compare that, obviously, because he's on a whole other playing field here.
Different style.
I think when I attempted to listen to the album, I wasn't like prepared for it. I think this is one of those albums, like, you really got to go in knowing that this is a bit more than your normal hip hop record. And so that out of the way, I will give it another chance, I promise. Okay. I do love the diversity on your list. Like, as you know, I'm a Kanye fan. It was cool to see some of his stuff pretty high on the list. And Outkast, absolutely.
Yeah.
Love that album. So yeah, I promise you I will try it again. It's just like, I think what it is musically, like, he comes off as just very intense.
Right. Yeah.
And that vibe just kind of hit me the wrong way, I think, on initial listen. But knowing what I'm in for now, I think I can approach it with a little bit more of an open mind. So
yeah. Well, I mean, because I think with this album he kind of had to go hard, because I think, you know, he gets his message across so clearly, and it's just crazy because, as I said, he's rapping his ass off. He's one of the greatest rappers of all time. I mean, I don't think anybody can really question that. And the fact he has you know, even 2 albums in the top 50, you know, more or less, it's just incredible. But I know you have a lot to say about this record, because I know it's one of your favorites.
Yes. Yeah. I totally respect this album being in the top 10 and being this high. This is my favorite hip hop album that I've heard so far. But yeah, like you said, just definitely one of the greatest concept albums of all time. Kendrick Lamar's rapping is amazing. Especially, I love the second track. It's For Free.
Right? Yeah, For Free. Yeah.
And when he's rapping over that like jazz drum beat, it's just so good.
Yeah, and it's cool to hear him do like these different characters within the song as well. Right. It's really impressive.
I love the closing tracks to this album too. You get which is just such an empowering song. And it's at a live concert too.
Yeah, which is crazy. Wow, how he was able to put that together.
Yeah. And I mean, Mortal Man is it's my favorite track on the album. It's yours too.
I think it's one of the greatest tracks in hip hop. I mean, that is such an achievement within itself. And that poem that he says at the end that he recites genuinely is one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard in my life. Like every time I hear that, my jaw is just to the floor. Yeah. And I'm like, how did someone come up with something so profound? I mean, really, that's what this album is. It is one of the most, not only just profound albums ever made, it's one of the most profound work of arts, you know, like, or works of art. I mean, it is just from top to bottom. There's only one or two songs where I'm like, yeah, I really like them, but I don't quite love it. But I would be remiss to give this album anything less than a 9.5, because I just think it is one of the greatest albums ever made, and I absolutely think number 8 is a perfect spot for on this list. So
well, I'm gonna go back and listen to Mortal Man first, and then listen to the whole album and give it my full attention, because I'll be honest, like I think I was doing some other stuff in the background too when I listened to it, and I know it's one of those albums that really requires your undivided attention. So
yeah, dude, you just gotta, like, what I do is I just lay down on my floor, just like take it all in at once, because it is it's just like you know, Dark Side of the Moon, where it's like, or you have to take in the whole thing at once, because everything is just so interconnected. I think with this album even more so, just thematically and all the songs coming together to create this truly a masterpiece in music. I mean, there isn't really too much more to say about it, but absolutely deserving to be this high at number 8. And now at number 7, I think an album that we can basically all agree on here is just incredible, is Revolver by the Beatles. What can you say about this album? Yet again, I mean, just well, even more so than To Pimp a Butterfly, obviously one of the most influential albums ever made. And you know, this was one I just kept coming back to after I got into the Beatles. I mean, really, honestly, the only song on there I think is like good, and that's the thing. The weakest song on here is good. I mean, what is that telling you? Is Love You Too, the George Harrison song, at least one of them, because I mean, obviously, you start this album off with, I think, one of George's absolute best contributions to the band with Taxman. It really showed, you know, where George was going as a songwriter to be able to write songs on the same level as John and Paul. And then you get like Eleanor Rigby, which, I mean, really, obviously Paul McCartney was diving into this with Yesterday, right? But I think here is where he really, you know, kicks it to another level with the orchestration, because as he said, it started out with a quartet on the song, and now it was an octet. And it's just the lyrics too, talking about, you know, this woman, Eleanor Rigby, you know, all the lonely people, where do they all come from? And just talking about how she, you know, basically lives out the rest of her existence and dies alone, which is just one of the most horrifying things ever, really, to anybody who, you know, wants to be remembered and to have love in their lives. I mean, it's just an incredible lyrical masterpiece, one of the best songs of all time, not just one of the best Beatles songs. And there's the diversity, you know, we were talking about kind of the diversity on To Pimp a Butterfly, but even more so on this. I mean, you have I'm Only Sleeping, which is a great John Lennon track about him just talking about wanting to, you know, not get up in the morning. I mean, it's simple as that, but what he's able to pull out of it musically with the harmonies and all that. And of course, you know, there's so many great songs. Yellow Submarine, which I know you kind of feel like doesn't fit on the album, but you know, obviously everybody knows it, you know.
It's still a great song,
right? Regardless. Yeah, just for Revolver, it might feel a bit off-putting to some, but obviously there's so many great. Good Day Sunshine is a great song. Andrew Bird Can Sing has an amazing dual guitar solos from Paul and George. And of course, I mean, wow, it's just there's all these songs I have to talk about because they're all so good. I think For No One, as you probably see, because I know you're putting together the top 100 Beatles song list. I rate that one very highly. I think that is a lyrical masterpiece, and yet again another reason why Paul McCartney is just an absolute genius. And then of course you have, I mean, I'm missing so many. Obviously, Tomorrow Never Knows is just who came up with that. I mean, really, obviously John Lennon, but those backward tape loops, which no one was doing at the time, and Ringo's drawing, boom, ba-dum, boom, boom, you know, like anybody who says Ringo is not a great drummer, quite frankly, is full of shit. I mean, they obviously they haven't heard Tomorrow Never Knows, or they wouldn't be saying that about him. But obviously, I also have to touch on, and you guys can pick up my slack if I'm missing anything, but I do have to mention Here, There, and Everywhere, which is my favorite Beatles song of all time. And I just, from a structural standpoint, one of the most brilliant songs ever written, how he, you know, starts the first verse with the first song from, or first word from the title. And then he goes into there, you know, the second verse, and then he goes on to that chorus, I want her everywhere, you know, and really brings that whole kind of, he bridges all those words so perfectly and gets so much out of the space in between lyrically. Maybe the greatest ballad of all time, as far as I'm concerned. And I mean, really just what a incredible piece of work when it comes to psychedelic rock. I mean, this really was, even Rubber Soul, which you saw them stepping in that direction of psychedelia, and but this was just a whole step in the other direction. Like, they were in another stratosphere when they made this album, and I don't think any other band at that time really could have made a record like this, besides maybe the Beach Boys. But even then, like, Pet Sounds is very different from this album right here. And I mean, this, honestly, this is in my top 10 of all time. It is at number 7. So quite frankly, I think Revolver is at a perfect spot at number 7.
No doubt, man. And yeah, Here, There, and Everywhere, I believe Paul has said that that's his favorite song that he ever wrote, at least with the Beatles. And I mean, yeah, it's just a gorgeous song. I mean, Paul especially, I think, was on top of his game on this record. I mean, just the dichotomy between Eleanor Rigby, like one of the darkest songs the Beatles ever had, and Good Day Sunshine. I mean, it shows he was firing on every cylinder. And yeah, Eleanor Rigby is absolutely one of my favorite Beatles songs. I mean, you mentioned all my favorites on here. Taxman, such a great, one of my favorite opening songs to any Beatle, like the little count in is so cool. And then Tomorrow Never Knows, one of the best closers of any album. And that whole song is all in the key of C. There's no chord changes, but it keeps you engaged the whole time with all those tape loops and effects. And you got it, man. Ringo, I mean, for him to keep up with Lennon and McCartney and Harrison, who was coming into his own right, with all the stuff they were always throwing at him. And for that matter, George Martin, the producer, you know, to come in and have an octet ready for Eleanor Rigby, or, you know, like on Rubber Soul, he played the harpsichord solo on In My Life. He was really kind of the fifth Beatle, and yeah, just one of the greatest producers of all time. And this, yeah, absolutely one of the best. And I think it just, the Beatles are my favorite band. And as you know, so I think the Revolver just like barely makes my top 5. That's how much I love the Beatles. But this is absolutely one of my favorite albums. So great job, man.
Yeah, definitely one of my favorite albums too. It was in my top 10 on my list. Yeah, like you guys said, you know, probably the most musically diverse album the Beatles had done at this point in their discography. You know, a bunch of classic songs: Eleanor Rigby, Yellow Submarine, Taxman. I especially love Paul's bass on Taxman.
Yeah,
so great.
He also played the guitar solo on Taxman.
Oh, right, because George,
not
like,
a lot of people know that.
Yeah.
Got to Get You Into My Life.
That's
another great one.
Yep.
Knew I was forgetting something.
Doc Robert too.
Yes.
Yeah, just so many amazing songs on one album.
No, she said. I completely forgot that one. That didn't not quite in my top 100 Beatles songs, but absolute classic. No, you guys bring up a lot of interesting points too, because I honestly, like, especially Paul's bass line, and especially on For No One, that might be Paul's best bass line. Like for me, he's like top 3 bassists of all time. And it's crazy to think he just picked this up because they needed a bass player, right? And yet he's like one of the most innovative players that studied for his pure melodic sensibilities. I mean, everyone knows that about Paul McCartney. I think he's the greatest melody maker when it comes to songwriters. You can't. The only one I can really touch him is like Stevie Wonder, John Lennon, for that matter. But even so, it just Bob Dylan even said this, that melody just pours out of Paul McCartney. But his bass line on For No One, I think, is like one of the maybe his best bass line of all time, which is saying so much. And I think it's because it's more prominent in the mix too, that it really stands out. But objectively speaking, I think you guys can probably agree. I mean, from a songwriting standpoint, this is their best album. Like, I don't think their songs were ever as introspective or as, groundbreaking or, as diverse as they were here. I mean, as I said, just listen to Eleanor Rigby or For No One, right? Or, I mean, really anything on this album, but especially the Paul stuff. I mean, this is Paul's album as much as like Rubber Soul is John Lennon's album. I mean, he runs away with this thing and gets all the best songs. But then again, that's not to knock any of the contributions. Also, another one of my favorites, I Want to Tell You, another great George Harrison track, which we can't go without mentioning because I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
As I'm sure you guys do too. So yeah, I mean, this is just an all-time classic, one of the most iconic. I mean, look at that album cover too. Like, I honestly look at all these album covers. I mean, they're all so iconic in their own right. Even To Pimp a Butterfly, that's one of those album covers from the past few years that really stands out. And I think is going to be maybe not quite as iconic as Revolver or like Dark Side of the Moon or anything like that, but certainly one of those ones that you will be seeing for years to come. Just like with this record, absolutely incredible. At number 7, which is crazy, because there's still so much more. And so with that out of the way, at number 6, we have Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band by the Beatles. Once again, anybody with 2 brain cells would know that the Beatles are, going to dominate the top 10 here. And yet this is another record, which I think in some ways, I actually think Revolver is better because I think it's a more groundbreaking record. But then again, like, I would say like my 8th favorite album of all time is Sgt. Pepper. So it's in my top 10 of all time. And I mean, how can you argue the merits of this? And yet again, an even better album cover. Like, that album cover has been, and I can't say this for Revolver, but this album cover has been parodied so many times. It's been replicated. Like, even we were talking about the French Dispatch by Wes Anderson. There's a teaser poster with all of them lined up like the Sgt. Pepper cover here. And I mean, talk about just coming up with this idea, Paul McCartney being on a plane and like hearing like they hit the salt and pepper, and he thought the guy was saying Sergeant Pepper. And so then basically he comes up with this whole concept. Oh yeah, that's a pretty good idea. And he writes down this whole concept where it's like, yeah, let's not perform as the Beatles. Let's perform as this band, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, if you will, and kind of like get all the pressures off, because people are wondering where are the Beatles, which is crazy to think because now artists nowadays will take like 2 or 3 years to put out an album, but they were thinking the Beatles were kind of out of the way because they didn't put out an album in like a year. But they were, I think Paul was, have you seen McCartney 3-2-1 yet?
Yes.
Okay. I watched the first few episodes, but that part where he's talking like, they were just kind of laughing because they knew that they were making this. And I mean, what a way to start out the album. Because in some ways it's not like, obviously, like if I were to say what's a better concept album, obviously I'd have to go with To Pimp a Butterfly, because this isn't really a concept album, right? Because it really is just, the few songs on there, like the first 2 songs and the last 2 songs that kind of bring the whole idea that this is like a performance they're doing, because there's no way anybody could have done this live. I mean, that's pretty obvious. Right. But that opening title track is just with that wonderful voice crack that was not in the recording. It's just such a wonderful way to kick off the record, and really invite you into this concert. And then you get that Billie Jean, and you go into With a Little Help of My Friends, which I probably think is the best Ringo song that he's ever done. And it's just, and then Paul and John singing in harmony. And then you go from that to Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, which is just one of the trippiest songs ever made. But obviously such a great song from John Lennon there. And I love the story behind it, though there were mixed reports whether it was something Julian said he took, or he was just that high on LSD that he went up on the rooftop and came up with the song or whatever and recorded it. But I'd like to think it was the latter, because it just feels like the lyrics, the abstract nature of Lennon's lyrics, especially at this point in time, like tangerine trees and marshmallow pies. And it's like, see the girl at the turnstile, or you go to the turnstile, the girl with kaleidoscope eyes. I mean, it's just crazy the sheer amount of poetry he's pulling out of these lyrics on this song, and especially on most of this record. But obviously you have the diversity on here. You got a lot of music hall influence, especially Fixing a Hole, which I just think is spectacular. The more I listen to it, the more I love it. Getting Better, which is another great song, and one of the, on the surface very upbeat and happy, but you really read those lyrics, especially when, and I know John Lennon said he couldn't sing the part where it's, I used to be cruel to my woman, I beat her and kept her apart from the things that she loved. And just, it's such a great statement about kind of like hope and optimism and trying to like move on with your life and become a better person. And then of course you have, this album is crazy, because then you get like She's Leaving Home, which I think is another just absolute masterpiece from Paul McCartney, and just with that harp at the beginning. And unfortunately that harpist just passed away like over a month ago. She, and so that was sad to hear. But her work on that is just so spectacular and just really kind of cemented in the annals of music history. But the lyricism, talking about, the way Paul McCartney, not only his storytelling, but also the way he's able to paint like this picture, like you see both sides of the story. You understand why this girl's leaving home, and you kind of, he also creates empathy for the parents as well. And it's just such a heartbreaking song. It's so beautiful. Really, how can you not love that song? And then of course you have Within You, Without You, which I think is one of Harrison's best songs within the realm of like, the traditions of Indian music. And of course you have sitars blaring all across the track. And there's obviously there's some I'm going to be missing, but you have songs like When I'm 64, which is just so much fun, and one of the earliest songs Paul wrote, once again. But then of course you get the outro with Sgt. Pepper, and then you get into Day in the Life, which I know I say Here, There, and Everywhere is my favorite Beatles song, and but this is easily second. And if anyone said this is the best Beatles song of all time, I would absolutely believe it. And obviously it ranked very highly on your 100 songs of all time list, in a very good spot, I might add, because this is one of just an absolute masterpiece. And I was watching the a couple years ago, I finally watched you've seen the Beatles Anthology documentary? Yeah. So like that part where George Martin is talking about when he puts on the beginning of A Day in the Life, and you hear, I read the news the day, oh boy, and he just says,
the voice, oh man, it's chilling, man.
Sends chills down your spine, and just watching him in the control booth just crying really is like, I was almost like in tears watching that. It is just one of the most moving things I've ever seen. But really, I think at this point, because obviously John Lennon and Paul McCartney were really on different pages when it came to songwriting, even though they're credited as such. But this to me was really, besides My Name, Look Up the Number, of course, was really the true last great, like truly incredible John Lennon Paul McCartney composition. And I love the dissonant strings and the orchestra playing all those different notes, connecting the two pieces again. And then you get that blaring horn right into Woke Up, Got Out of Bed, Dragged the Home Across My Head, and that such a fun Paul McCartney part of the song. And really just one of the greatest masterpieces in music. Especially that ending chord that like John and George Martin and Ringo and everybody was playing. I mean, it just rings in your ears and it just fades away into nothingness. And it is just what a amazing way to end an album. Maybe I like Desolation Row better, but one of absolutely the best closing tracks to any album in history. I mean, this album itself absolutely deserved to be this high on the list because it legitimized the album format. If the Beatles didn't do so already, as well as the Beach Boys, I mean, this really showed that albums weren't just like, like the early Elvis Presley albums where they just threw a bunch of songs on and released it. And I love his debut album, but I mean, you look at where music came from like that time to like 11 years later in 1967, where you're really creating these really intricate pieces of music and weaving them together to kind of create this whole. I mean, you really don't get much better than Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. It's amazing. What can I say?
Yeah, and just for a day in the life alone, it's amazing. And the fact that it was just this artistic statement. I too like Revolver a little bit more as an overall album, like just because there's not a weak track on Sgt. Pepper, but there's not as many songs that I come back to and revisit a lot, like aside from A Day in the Life.
Right.
I do love Lovely Rita, the Meter Maid, and Benefit of Mr. Kite. Everything is great. But I can only imagine, like, for the people that lived through the release of this album, it was just like so game changing. At the time, there was nothing like it. And although, like you pointed out, the concept is very loose. It's not really like, I don't even consider it that much of a concept album, but the concept that it was just like all these songs that flow into one another and this huge artistic statement from this band who up until that point had been more or less a pop rock band. They were of course growing gradually, but this was just like you said, they had been off the radar a little bit. They had stopped playing live shows right after Revolver came out, and they just put all their focus on this. And I'm actually reading the Beatles anthology book right now too, to kind of refamiliarize myself doing the top 100 Beatles songs. But George actually says that he didn't have the best time making this because he felt like he was, John and Paul were really taking the reins, especially in the studio, and being a bit more perfectionist and saying, this is how I want this to sound. Obviously, they were employing a lot more different kinds of instrumentation, like you said, harp and harpsichords and flutes and symphony orchestras.
Right.
And, George, it was cool, though, that he was coming in with something totally different as well, like the Indian music that he brought into the picture. So just amazing album. And definitely deserves its spot here, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this is a top 3 album for me personally. What an amazing record. This is probably my second favorite Beatles album.
Which is saying a lot, right?
I think this is probably my musically my favorite Beatles album. I just love all the different kinds of instrumentation going on this thing, and this is such a fun album to listen to too. I mean, not only do you have like the more introspective songs, but you get some more, just fun poppy songs to listen to on here too. So I mean, it's just a really amazing record.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, really, and as you were saying, the symphony orchestras, I mean, this really a lot of people started using them after this because not many rock groups were doing that. But the Beatles, I mean, yet again, another reason why they just took everything to another level. And this is absolutely prime example, textbook 101. I can't believe that Rolling Stone dropped this to 24. Just especially when it comes to influence. I mean, it deserves so much more than that, but really just what an incredible record. And I think this is a good spot for it. Not number one, but it's a good spot at number 6. I think definitely should be in the top 10 if we're talking about influence and whatnot. But yeah, so now we're getting into the top 5.
Yeah.
So this is going to be really exciting, because I think a lot of these albums now at this point kind of they're a little bit above these records here, I think, in regards to votes and whatnot. So yeah, let's get into it. Number 5 on this list, we have Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys. Yeah, you knew this album was going to be here. I mean, anybody who knows anything about music would, knows that it's on this list. It has to be. And yet again, I mean, just the whole story of Brian Wilson listening to Rubber Soul and saying, like, oh, like, this is amazing. Like, there's no filler on this album. Like, we got to make something like this. And just him kind of really reaching inward and pulling this all out with lyricist Tony Asher, of course. We can't forget to mention him, because without him, really this album wouldn't have worked as well, because obviously, you look at Brian's beautiful compositions, which I think, I mean, he really is modern day Mozart or modern day Bach. I mean, this guy, he might be the greatest composer in contemporary pop music. But and especially the fact that this all just kind of came from his head, and he's like, I'm going to, orchestrate this. I'm going to get the Wrecking Crew in here, get a very Spectre-esque production. And just what he was able to make was an absolute masterwork. I mean, I like this more than Sgt. Pepper and Revolver. So I'm really glad to see it this high, even though I'm not surprised by it at all. But really, I mean, especially starting this off with Wouldn't It Be Nice is just, I mean, wouldn't it be nice if we were older? Everybody knows that song. It's just so catchy. It's so upbeat, but yet there's such a profoundness to it as well in the lyrics. Like, I love it's like, it only, what's the lyric? It's like, this, it seems the more we talk about it, the only makes it worse to live without it. But let's talk about it, saying, like, even though this might not be realistic for us, we, let's talk about this, because this is what we're trying to pursue, this love here. And I mean, just such a beautiful song, one of their absolute best songs, maybe one of the best songs of all time, and just absolutely puts you in the space of like you're on the beach at California or something, just sunny skies galore. That's just kind of what it makes you feel. But I mean, the instrumentation on here, I mean, this is such a groundbreaking, I think even more groundbreaking than Sgt. Pepper's, because there's so much on here that Brian was doing musically that no one had ever done before. I mean, especially just listen to instrumentation on the second song, You Still Believe in Me, where he has got the clown horn in there too, which is so bizarre. But the song is so spacious production wise. Of course, you bring in his beautiful, beautiful voice at the time, which is just unparalleled, just unbelievable singer in the 1960s. And then you bring in Mike Love's baritone on the track, and then you bring all the, their was it 5-part harmonies. Yeah, you bring them all in together, and just the way they come together is just so beautiful. And just all these songs are either about trying to make it with someone, trying to find yourself, or just trying to reach out for connection. And I think this is why this album spoke to me, because the first time I heard this a couple years ago, I'll be honest, I was not in a really good spot personally. A lot of stuff was going on in my life, especially with people I thought were my friends. And I kind of put this album on and really just tapped in more than any other album into what Brian Wilson was saying, and it just blows me away to this day, because I just revisited this album like a few months ago, and I wasn't necessarily I was kind of going through a tough time then as well. Wow, it sounds like my life is so horrible. I'm not really, but just a couple moments here and there. But I revisited a few months ago, and I tell you, listening to Here Today, which is another just great song and just really melancholy underneath, despite the bombastic nature of the productions with the horns blaring and Hal Blaine's. I mean, especially on, I do have to mention Hal Blaine, who's like the greatest session drummer of all time, as we mentioned on Bridge Over Troubled Water as well. But especially when he comes in, I'm waiting for the day, the boom, 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 boom. It just is so powerful every time he hit the kit. But especially on Here Today and listening to I Just Wasn't Made for These Times. I mean, you really have never experienced Pet Sounds until you're laying next to your stereo system just crying. And that was kind of the experience I had. I'd never really say that about albums, because I don't get like too emotional at this sort of stuff, but this is like one of the only albums I've ever cried at. I mean, it's just that profound. It just, and it's so weird because every time I revisit it, it reflects what's going on in my life in a different way. And I don't know any other album that's able to do that. I really just, it blows my mind how good this album is. And of course I have to mention like classics like Sloop John B, which I mean is a cover of a traditional folk song, but yeah, it's so Brian Wilson. And obviously you get that lyric, this is the worst trip I've ever been on, which kind of adds, a little innuendo in there when especially when it came to Brian's elevated drug use at this time, which obviously really kind of haunted him even to today. But really, I mean, this is just what a masterwork. Like, this is one of those albums where it's like, it's so hard to believe that this was actually conceived in the mind of somebody. And I think one of the most beautiful, one of the most emotional, one of the absolute greatest albums ever made. This is a top 5 album for me. I actually have it at number 5. The only problem with it, well, not really a problem, but the title track, funnily enough, is the one, because it was apparently a rejected James Bond theme. And so I listened to it, it's still really good, but it's like, I don't really understand why it's on the album. And that's just me, but this is so close to being a 10 out of 10 for me. But as it stands, I mean, it's Pet
I'm
Sounds.
surprised it's not, for how you've talked about it, honestly.
I know, it's just that one song, man.
yeah, I hear you.
Still really good.
But
good.
I mean, just for God Only Knows alone,
yeah.
I mean, just one of the greatest ballads of all time. The melody is just, there's nothing else like it. I mean, I'd rank it up there with like McCartney's Yesterday as one of the most amazing melodies ever to come out of someone's mind, and
even better, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's so cool that you have these 3 albums in a row, because of course at the time the Beatles and the Beach Boys were sort of not exactly rivalries, but they were influencing one another, and Revolver influenced Pet Sounds and Pet Sounds influenced Sgt. Pepper, because they wanted to put out the very best thing that they could. And Paul McCartney has said that I'm not sure if he said Pet Sounds is his favorite album of all time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, because it really just had that profound an effect on him. Just what an amazing record that, to me, it gets better every time I listen to it. I'm not the biggest Beach Boys fan. Actually, I enjoy the Smile Sessions even more than Pet Sounds personally.
I don't blame you for that, honestly.
It's brilliant. I mean, just the concept of that, and the fact that it even got finished all those years later is amazing. But and that ends with Good Vibrations and just so many cool tracks, Heroes and Villains. But Pet Sounds, absolutely. I mean, just like Sgt. Pepper, just for the reason that at the time that it was in, and still to this day influencing albums as we speak. It's just incredible.
Yeah, and I actually just listened to this album only like a month or 2 ago. And nice. I mean, I loved it right from the get-go. It like instantly made my top 10 albums. So yeah, I mean, what can you say? I mean, that album cover is iconic.
Yeah, another one.
I mean, the classics, God Only Knows, Wouldn't It Be Nice, Sloop John B. And not only do you have all those great you know, deeper introspective songs, but you even have a couple of great instrumental tracks on here too. The title track and Let's Go Away for a While. So yeah, I mean, just another amazing collection of songs. Definitely one of the greatest albums of all time, and totally respect it being in the top 5.
Absolutely. And just to think it's only like 32 minutes long, and yet you're able to pull so much about it. I don't know why I didn't mention God Only Knows, because it's my favorite song on this record. It's my favorite Beach Boys song. And as you said, I mean, it's one of the greatest songs of all time. One of the most beautiful, just so emotional, you know. I may not always love you, but long as there are stars above you, you never need to doubt it. I'll make you so sure about it. God only knows what I'd be without you. Like, just thinking about it just kind of like gets me choked up a little bit, how beautiful it is. And I mean, yet again, I mean, this is more of a concept album than Sgt. Pepper's is. And I think, you know, because it's just so thematically so linked together. The music is so cohesive, even if it's not necessarily strung together in that way. Yeah, this honestly, this is a perfect spot for it. Yeah, at number 5, I can't argue it anymore. So all right, number 4. Oh, I know you're going to be happy about this one, because I know it's on the wall there of your perfect albums.
All right.
You have a guess as what it is?
Well, I know that there is another Beatles coming, so I'm wondering if that could be it. Abbey Road.
Is that your final guess? You ready to lock that in?
Well, it could also be Dark Side of the Moon. But I'm thinking both of those may be higher, so I'm really not sure now what my final answer is.
Okay, so at number 4, we have Blue by Joni Mitchell.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, no, I honestly though, I'm a little surprised that it made it this high, like over all the Beatles albums and Kendrick and whatnot. Well, actually, I'm not surprised she made it over Kendrick. But I mean, come on, one of the greatest singer-songwriter albums. And obviously, just to kind of get into this album, kind of introduce it, you have that great Graham Nash quote, who of course was her boyfriend back in the day. Was it Graham Nash who was like basically saying, you know, listening to these songs, like, hey, Joni, leave something for someone else? Or maybe that was David Crosby. One of her exes said that. And it's just, I mean, yeah, you listen to these lyrics. I mean, Joni Mitchell just absolutely bears her soul on this album. And I think that's why it stands so much, despite the unorthodox guitar tunings and really melodies that she came up with that you could be nobody else's except Joni's. I mean, really, especially on Little Green, which this is another album. The first time I heard Little Green, I was just blown away, and I was like, I had tears in my eyes. It is just so beautiful. And then learning like the actual story,
it's heartbreaking.
Just how she, you know, had to give away her daughter. It's like, oh my goodness, like anybody has to go through that. And you have that amazing lyric. I just love the chorus of this song, especially where she's like saying, you know, there'll be birthday clothes and icicles. She's like saying all these like happy things. She's like, and then sometimes there will be sorrow. And you just it just kind of sinks in, where it's like, yeah, your life is going to be full of, you know, so many great things, but yet there's always going to be something missing there. I mean, it is just incredibly beautiful. This is like, I think this is the greatest song anybody has ever written to their child. I mean, just the most heartbreaking too on so many levels. But obviously, and that's not even like the classic everybody remembers from this album, because you have so many great songs on here, especially like California, which is so upbeat, so much fun. And honestly, I have to talk about Joni's delivery, because she was such an unconventional vocalist and lyricist, because especially the way she suspends certain phrases, especially on well, I'll get into it a little bit, but obviously California is a great song. But yeah, the one I really do want to talk about first is A Case of You, which is the perfect example of this, where she, you know, is saying, you know, I love where she's like talking about, you know, I met a girl who talked like you, you know, she said, stay with him if you like the way she suspends certain phrases. I'm trying to think of the exact lyric, but there's a certain way she suspends words on that song that just completely subvert your expectations of where she's going with rhyming and all this sort of stuff. Just absolutely one of the greatest poets. And I mean, you have to have Joni Mitchell in the top 10 songwriters of all time. I mean, she's just incredible. And you have so many other great songs that are just so interesting, like The River. I mean, a great interpolation of Jingle Bells there, which it really is kind of a Christmas classic in its own right, if you want to look at it that way. I mean, there's so many. I'm just trying to remember the opening track. What was the opening track again? I don't know. I'm blanking.
All I Want.
All I Want, another great one. Which I believe she wrote about James Taylor, who she was dating at the time, and just so many tracks. Carrie is another great one. Really, this. I mean, when it comes to singer-songwriter albums, you really don't get anything this authentic and this personal. And I mean, genuinely, from what I've seen, Joni Mitchell is one of the most authentic people in the music industry. There's no artifice about her at all. And I think if you listen to this album, you can already tell that. And just not to be deductive or anything, but she's easily like my favorite female artist of all time. And just especially talk about this album. I mean, maybe the greatest album made by a female solo artist. I mean, really, just what a beautiful, profound piece of work.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's every song on here is amazing. I mean, even the songs you didn't mention, like My Old Man, which is kind of like a quirky song, but even in that, she has these profound lyrics that are kind of silly, but she says like, when you're gone, the bed's too big, the frying pan's too wide, and just like these cute little things. And like you said, Joni's delivery too is so unconventional, like that soprano voice with the vibrato. No one quite sounds like her. And she can sometimes be like off-putting to some people vocally, but I think she sounds beautiful, like angelic. And there's not a lot of people that I could even think. It's weird though. I was just listening, I think yesterday, to a cover of the title track Blue that was done recently by Brandy Carlisle.
Oh, and they're good friends, I think.
And she pulled it off, man. She sounded great. That title track too, man, that's like, oh my gosh, it's so heavy. That line where she says, everybody's saying that hell's the hippest way to go. I don't think so, but I'm gonna take a look around it though. It's just brilliant, man. And I mean, there's not another songwriter, like I would almost say she's like the female Dylan as far as songwriting goes, at that level. And everything, the closing track, The Last Time I Saw Richard, it's just one of the greatest breakup albums of all time, on top of one of the greatest, just probably the greatest folk record, I think, as far as just these 10 songs all being so great. Carrie, you get a little bit of that upbeat vibe on Carrie and California and All I Want, but then you have the like slit your wrists songs like The River. You know, I wish I had a river I could skate away on. Just, oh my God, man, it's amazing. And I'm so glad it's this high on the list, man. That's awesome.
I figured you'd be very happy about that placement.
Yes. I was totally surprised. That's great.
I know you were surprised.
Yeah. I kind of forgot about this album, but I didn't
a lot of people usually do.
yeah. I mean,
but you know what? Prince said that it was one of his favorite albums.
Yeah. No, because I know he did a cover of what was it? Case of You, I believe he did. That was released on one of his posthumous albums there. I haven't listened to it yet.
Yeah, I didn't know that people love this album this much to put it up in the top 5. But it's amazing. Joni Mitchell is definitely like one of the best female vocalists of all time. And I think the best part about this record in general is Joni Mitchell, like her presence. Like you can tell she's just pouring all of her soul into these songs. And just, yeah, the songwriting is phenomenal too. Also one of my favorite folk albums I've heard. I'd probably put it above some of Bob Dylan's albums, and it's like songs of Leonard Cohen. So
I'd put it above all Dylan's albums, and I'm a huge Dylan fan, but this, I mean, this just this beats out Blood on the Tracks by just a little bit there. But yeah, absolutely incredible. I voted for it. I wouldn't put this high, but I absolutely understand why it is here, because everybody seems to kind of feel that way, and I know it was on both your lists. So yeah, this is awesome to see it at number 4. Now, do you guys have any guesses as to what the number 3 album on this list is?
Well, I know the 2 that I guessed are still coming, I think, but I'm not sure what 3 is.
I'm thinking it's Thriller.
Is that your final choice?
I think so, yeah.
Well, Zach, you're right.
Okay.
Thriller number 3. Yeah,
Good
you know
guess,
what,
man?
I don't know if it should be this high though. I mean, obviously, it's the definition of iconic. I just think, for me at least, the 80s production it sounds a little bit dated with all the synths and stuff. But damn it, if this is not like the greatest pop record ever made, like I had to put this on my list. You know, it was there. I mean, come on, especially with, you know, starting off with want to be starting something, just incredible. Just automatically, you know, you get that riff, and then Jackson comes in with his killer vocals. I mean, it's just, and then the mama say mama son mama kusa, mama say mama son mama kusa, you know, it's so catchy. The part about the vegetables is a little weird, but you know,
but it works
really,
somehow. He makes it work.
Somehow works, right? Yeah. But it's just, what an iconic track. And I mean, talk about, I mean, really, even though I think a lot of these records in the top 10 are better than Thriller, the thing about it, it's so iconic. I mean, what album had 7 top 10 singles? I mean, who has ever done that? I mean, especially, I mean, obviously The Girl Is Mine, which I absolutely love for all its sort of cheesiness in some way. Just having Paul McCartney come on here and sing this really fun song with Michael is just awesome. And the features on this album, of course, you have the legendary horror actor Vincent Price on Thriller, you know, that amazing outro, sink it to the hounds of hell and rocked in the corpse's shell, you know, like all that stuff. And just what an iconic almost a borderline novelty song, but really it's so much more than that, especially with the video, which is, you know, acclaimed as one of the greatest music videos of all time. Really revolutionized everything. And obviously the other singles on here, like PYT, Pretty Young Thing, I mean, how can you not love that track? There's so many more. I mean, Beat It, with yet again another great feature from the late great Eddie Van Halen, with that blistering guitar solo, which I can't believe he asked Pete Townsend to do this, because no disrespect to Pete Townsend, obviously you guys know how much I love the Who, but I mean, he would never, he when it comes to guitar players, he doesn't have anything on Eddie Van Halen in that sense, you know, him pulling that solo out, just incredible. But I mean, I know I'm missing like so many, because that's like 4 of the top 10 singles I mentioned. And of course, I have to mention, wait, was Human Nature one of them?
Yes.
Yeah, that's another really, not necessarily my favorite, but obviously really good song. You know, it's so catchy. And of course, I have to talk about Billie Jean, which is like maybe the greatest, the pure pop song of all time. And just that groove, that you know, it just automatically gets stuck in your head. I think the greatest song Michael Jackson ever wrote, the greatest song he ever recorded, really. I mean, this is just, in this album too, historically speaking, I mean, obviously the best-selling record in history. So I think popularity really factored into this list too, for it to being this high on the list. I think in some ways, because I think it's more of like a, you know, realistically speaking, I'd say like a top 15 record. But obviously I'm not going to knock it too much, because it's just so iconic, and it shattered racial barriers when it came to music. I mean, everybody was eating this up, and he was visiting Reagan somehow, of all presidents. So he really just had such a profound influence in the pop world, and him and Quincy Jones, because I got to give credit to the great Quincy Jones for putting this together and collaborating with Michael Jackson, because they knew exactly what they wanted. They set out to make a blockbuster, and boy, did they ever. I mean, really the biggest blockbuster in music history. I mean, there's no argument there. This is the biggest album of all time.
Yeah. Culturally speaking, this was like the second coming of the Beatles, you know,
right,
as far as just such an explosion in the music world. And, you know, I was excited to be there for it, even though I was only 4 years old at the time. I remember, you know, all the music videos, Thriller, you know, they used to play like every hour on MTV, and like not just the short version, the full whatever 20-minute thing, and it was just so cool. But yeah, man, my wife is going to be super excited that this is this high on the list, because I think Michael Jackson may be her favorite artist.
That's
and
fair.
You know, he was really incredible, and I think, you know, obviously his legacy may have been tainted a tad, but as far as musically speaking, I mean, just Billie Jean, like that bass line he came up with, just, you know, with his mouth, and then, you know, had these musicians recreate it, and just incredible. And then of course, on top of that, throwing the moonwalk into it. I mean, it was just such a phenomenon that it's no wonder he became as huge as he did at the time. And yeah, all the songs you mentioned, I think you pretty much mentioned all the tracks on the record, which there really isn't a weak one.
Right.
Me personally, I like Off the Wall better, just because I don't think it's hard to argue like a better A-side in any album than Off the Wall. Like that, just from Don't Stop Till You Get Enough through the title track, just all nonstop incredible dance tracks. But Thriller, man, yeah, it's incredible. Just yeah, everything you said, man. And I don't really hate that it's this high. I mean, I wouldn't put it this high, but definitely understand it.
Yeah, and I just wanted to mention real quick, I mean, that argument with Off the Wall, completely understandable. I think it holds up better as an album. Just it doesn't sound dated at all. I just think Thriller has more diversity, and it's structured better, and it has more iconic songs. So it's like neck and neck. You could tell me Off the Wall is better and be like, yeah, you're absolutely 100% right.
Yeah, I mean, this album is just a collection of some of the greatest classic pop songs of all time. And like you said, like all the features he got to be on this thing is just incredible. You know, Eddie Van Halen, Vincent Price, Paul McCartney, just incredible. And even like the deep cuts on this thing, like Lady in My Life.
Oh yeah.
Even though that's probably like my least favorite, but it's still a good.
Oh, that's your least favorite?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I like it more than what's that other one? Baby Be Mine.
I actually like that one more.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I guess we agree to disagree.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, those are still great songs. Yeah. Is this still the greatest selling album of all time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
As far as something that's not a compilation, because I think the Eagles' greatest hits technically sold more, but as far as an individual album that was released, I believe Thriller still is it. Yeah.
Actually, I do have the statistic on that, because one of my friends was asking me about this. We went to dinner. It was Bobby. We went to dinner, and he was like, isn't Eagles, like, don't they have an album that's like the best selling album of all time? I was like, I don't think so. I think Thriller is. I looked it up. The Eagles, their greatest hits, 1971 to 75. That technically, it's the best selling album in the US.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. But of all time, it's actually Thriller, because I was like, I have to look this up.
Worldwide. Yeah.
Right.
That's
so
cool.
That's the statistic on that one.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't the greatest selling album worldwide for no reason.
Right.
So it's
absolutely.
In this instance, I think it's like, you know, you always say that, you know, just because something's popular doesn't necessarily mean it's good. But I think this is definitely an exception.
Couldn't have said it better myself, man, honestly. So yeah, I mean, and I know you probably didn't expect it to be this high.
No,
but...
definitely not this high.
But here it is at number 3 on this list. So okay, here we are. Last 2 albums. I think you guys kind of have an idea what's number 1 and 2. But let me preface this by saying, out of all the lists I've got, out of all 27, I believe these albums were on 18 of those lists.
Wow.
And they tower over every single record when it comes to point. Like, it's not even close. Nothing, not even Thriller comes quite close to these 2 albums that we have at 1 and 2. And I think, I mean, yeah, I think you guys can figure it out. But without further ado, at number 2, we have The Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd. This is crazy. This is actually my second favorite album of all time. And as you can see from my score, and as you can see from his wall there, perfect album. I mean, you know, this is something that just is just from another world. And I think that's why everybody loves to smoke to it or whatever. But really, I mean, what Pink Floyd was able to come up with, especially after the departure of Syd Barrett, they kind of had those few years where they were trying to figure out what they were. And then Roger Waters really stepped up front and center and it was like, you know what, we need to make a statement. And here comes Dark Side of the Moon, which really, I would say tackles everything and anything under the sun, but obviously in this case it's the moon. So, you know, he just was able to pull out so much. And I think sonically, the most cohesive album of all time, sonically the most impressive album I've ever heard in my entire life. Mm-hmm. Like the soundscapes that they were able to create between David Gilmour on his guitar, you know, Roger Waters' really spacious bass playing, Nick Mason's really just controlled it, because he a drummer that just isn't really flashy at all, but he, you know, without him it wouldn't really sound like Pink Floyd, right? And then Richard Wright on the synthesizer, especially on The Run, which is just, it's an instrumental, but yet you're able to pull so much out of it, especially, you know, the concept of Roger Waters' fear of flying and all that sort of stuff. So you really get that, you just great line. There's so much paranoia build up in that. But just with the going back to the title, or the opening track was Speak to Me, just that heartbeat, the indication of the start of this life. And then you get that chronicle through time, and really right to time, because I mean, you get that maybe the most disarming and maybe scariest moment in music when you hear those alarm clocks going off like crazy. And then you get to that question, ticking away the moments to make up a dull day, you know, and just then David Gilmour's guitar playing on it. I mean, come on, I think maybe the greatest guitarist alive at this point, because unfortunately there's just not as many around from that time, but just amazing what they're able to pull out that track. And then you get the whole concept where it's like, you know, kind of how we live our lives kind of isolated from everything else. We kind of go throughout not really being happy with what we're trying to pursue, and not really in the end just amounting to basically nothing in the long scheme of things. And it's just so harrowing. Obviously you have that amazing line, you know, at the end of time, where he's like saying, you know, then one day time will find you, you know, like, was it 3 years or whatever, 10 years have come and gone. It's like, you missed the starting gun, or, you know, something along those lines. I mean, just incredible. Just the motifs strung together are just crazy. And then you get, which, the amazing, Great Gig in the Sky, which you don't really need to have much besides Claire Torrey's just one of the greatest vocal performances on any record, where she's just screaming and just done so well. I mean, really, it's flawless. But, you know, when it kind of, the song winds down and you hear her kind of settling in to her vocals, and the way I take it is it's just kind of accepting death. Like she's being scared of it the whole track, and then at some point she just finally comes to accept it. And it is one of the most powerful moments in music. And then it's like this whole album, because then you get Money with the cash registers, which is just an amazing opening, and just that hook. And yet again, another amazing guitar solo from Gilmour. And that goes right into the synths on Us and Them, which is one of my absolute favorite songs of all time. One of my favorite Floyd songs. My favorite song on this album, surprisingly, though I think Time might give it a run for its money, if you ask me. But just the chord progressions are so subversive, just so spacious, so ethereal, really out of this world. I mean, it's unbelievable what they were able to put together on this album. And then as it goes along, obviously you have what's the other instrumental track? It's my least favorite song on the album.
Any color you like.
Color you like, yeah. I mean, yet again, it does. I don't think it adds like a whole lot to the album, but I think it just fits so well musically, and it's such a great track. You can't help but love it. And then of course, they chronicle everything, the beginning of the life, greed, all this stuff. And then you get to the end, well, almost to the end, with why am I blank? Of course I'm blanking on the title now.
Brain damage. Eclipse. Yeah.
When you get to Brain Damage, you get the lunatic is on the grass, and just how they're talking about Syd Barrett in that moment, kind of tapping into mental illness, because at this point in time nobody was really talking about this, especially in music. I mean, this is an issue that, of course, at this point in time has gotten such a widespread amount of attention that it absolutely deserves for many reasons, and just incredible. And then channeling that right into Eclipse, is like, we'll see you on the dark side of the moon, and like all the interludes from the spoken words that people are kind of adding to the concept, to ending with, there's no dark side of the moon, really, to that amazing, just the heartbeat finally stopping, bringing a close to what is an absolute masterwork if I've ever heard one. I mean, this is one of my, when it comes to like movies and music all together, I mean, this stands right at the top, man. I mean, every time I listen to this album, it gets better and better, and it's just unbelievable. I mean, and this is the thing, they're talking about getting forgotten, kind of living your life, not necessarily wanting what you want to do or doing what you want to do, but here comes Pink Floyd talking about this very human thing, and just kind of talking about us, the reality of being human beings, and really it just comes to close in such a beautiful way, in a way that they'll never be forgotten, that's for sure. And I think the Dark Side of the Moon was really the reason why, and why they went on to create so many iconic albums, that 3 more of these on this list already. So I mean, just one of the greatest bands of all time. Absolutely love Pink Floyd. Absolutely a perfect album if I've ever heard one. An absolute masterpiece of the highest order.
Yeah, I couldn't say it any better, man. 10 out of 10. Pink Floyd, yeah, definitely right up there with the Beatles, and really taking the concept album to new heights. And that's saying something, because we saw The Wall on the list as well, which is also maybe even better as a concept album that tells a story,
right?
But this being such a concise, like 45-minute album that tackles all these just big weighty subjects, money, time, religion, war, and encapsulates just the human experience, basically. And Roger Waters at the top of his game lyrically. He had said on the album before, or maybe it was 2 albums before, on Metal, they discovered, or he was kind of new to writing about empathy, and you really feel that even more so on this record. And then I love that Gilmour really gets his time to shine, not just on guitar, which is incredible, but vocally. He's obviously the better, as you've said, of the vocalists. And the background vocalists are great. You mentioned I forget her name, Claire Torrey. Yeah, on Great Gig in the Sky, incredible, which was an improv performance. Like they just threw her out there and she did it. Dick Parry's saxophone playing on Money, incredible. Just like everybody that was involved with this thing was just perfect. And Us and Them, I think, is one of those tracks too. Like it works so great as a whole, but then on the radio you hear all these songs: Us and Them, Time, Money, Brain Damage. And Us and Them, I think, perfectly like musically shows what Pink Floyd was all about, like leaving the space there, as you mentioned, like with Nick Mason as a drummer. He wasn't too showy, he just did what the song needed. And then, you know, the echoes on us, and them, and there's not too much going on, but it doesn't need to be, you know. And it's like Pink Floyd was so influential in that way that they could say, like, yeah, just let the track breathe, for lack of a better word. And that breathe and time, the way that comes back in, the motifs just coming back in, it's just amazing, man. Absolutely one of the best.
And I just have to interject for a sec, because I mean, just the way they threw jazz in there too with the saxophones, it feels very improvisational, and really no one was really doing anything like that this time. And you know, well, you can go, and then I'll finish what I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, this is my number 2 album as well. It's definitely a perfect album to me. This is the first album, I would say, that I kind of understood, like, you can't just listen to specific songs, like pick and choose songs off this album. You have to listen to the entire thing from front to back. But yeah, I mean, the sound of this album is just so surreal. Like, when you sit down to listen to it, it really does just like take you to a different place. It's crazy. I mean, yeah, everything about this album is just absolutely incredible. You know, the production, the instrumentation, the lyrical content, just everything is just perfect about this thing.
Yeah, I mean, really, I think we're all in complete agreement on this album, which I think shows why it's so high on this list. Everybody, well, actually, I know someone who doesn't like this album, but let's forget about that. But for the most part, everybody can agree unanimously that this is one of the greatest records ever made, just one of the greatest pieces of art, like I was saying with To Pimp a Butterfly, you know. But this is even better. I mean, obviously, this is Pink Floyd, and I'm so glad to see it at number 2, because my thing with I've grown to appreciate a little bit more, especially because it's gotten me into a lot more hip hop. The Rolling Stone list, which has us at like 55, which is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, how is this album not at least in the top 5? I just, it is beyond me. But you know, I think this is saying something, having it people vote it this high at number 2, and absolutely the perfect spot for this album, because I think there's one other record that gives us a run for its money, and so let's get it. This is it, guys. We got a drum roll, please.
I know what's coming.
The number 1 album on the Nathaniel Ahart and Company's list of the top 100 albums of all time is Abbey Road by the Beatles. I mean,
there it is.
This album had like over 600 points or something just on its own. It even towered over Dark Side of the Moon by like 100 something points, or something close to that. And it's hard, you know, it's not hard to see why, really. I mean, this, to me, this was the first album I actually really like paid attention to, because I remember, I'll kind of give the background to this album. I was starting off my freshman year in college, and there's this guy who sells records right down by the ice arena at my school. And I was like, oh, look at this. And apparently, you know, I bought it, and it was like $15 or something. It was a little worn. Actually, I do have a copy of it back there, which I can, you know what, I'm going to grab it.
Do it, man.
Let's see. It's right around here. I didn't think I was getting up for this episode.
It's worth it, man.
Yeah. All right, here it is. Like, go through my massive record collection. See if I can squeeze back through here. Oh! All right, so right here, the copy of Abbey Road. You can see it's a little worn, but I bought it, and I went to class one day, and there was this guy in my class who was looking at it, and I could tell he wore Beatles hats and stuff. And this was before, I knew a few songs obviously, but I didn't really listen. And he looked at it and he's like, "Can I see that?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I handed it to him. He's like, "This is an original print," and he could tell by like the serial code because he's that huge of a Beatles fan. And actually, it turned out like he's one of my absolute best friends now. So kind of funny how that all works out in the end. But not only just that story, this record was really the first one. Besides the Red album, by the Beatles, I also bought that from the same guy. First, I knew I had to get a record player, so this is one of the first ones besides the Red album I really listened to in full. And I always, just from the get-go, I knew that it was just the greatest thing I'd ever heard, because obviously there's so much we will get into, but that Abbey Road medley at the end with all those songs coming together, because obviously I, coming from a background where I was in, this, I was in a lot of musical theater in high school, I was in a lot of music courses. I took music theory, all this stuff. And so when I heard that, I was like, oh, this is so cohesive, and especially liking movies. I'm a big stickler for structure. So I was hearing this and I'm like, this is incredible how they're weaving all these songs in, especially like, well, I'll get into it a little bit, but I was just like, this is amazing. I thought it was kind of like considered a concept album. Obviously not a concept album, but it really is. It's a symphony. It's really the best way I can put it. But yeah, I mean, even so on this thing, you got the opening track, Come Together, just John Lennon once again hitting us with those abstract lyrics. Everybody's mother and their mother knows the song, or so I would hope. It's just such an iconic classic. And then you have songs like leading up to that. I think is Something the second track on there.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So it's like you go into that and to Something. And I mean, we're talking about like John and Paul having the best songs on this album. But honestly, I think George Harrison has the two best songs on this album, which by this point in time, it just goes to show like how he had really flourished. He's writing songs that are better than John and Paul. And I think Something is easily like top 3 favorite Beatles songs, top 10 favorite songs of all time. And it's just so beautiful, that beautiful chord progression, that chromatic ascension to the chorus, down, 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 and just the beautiful lyrics, you're asking me, will my love grow? I don't know. You stick around and it may show. I don't know. And it's just such a beautiful way of saying, like, there's something about you that I really love, but like, will this last for eternity? It's hard to say at this present moment. And just such a beautiful way of subtly putting that sentiment together on record. I mean, it's one of the most beautiful songs. It's one of the best ballads ever written, and obviously I think the best song George Harrison ever wrote, which is crazy because I mean, obviously you have Here Comes the Sun on here, which I think even more people know than Come Together. Here, that every time I think of it, I think of the Bee Movie every time, because I remember seeing that as a kid in the theater, and I remember that song. I was like, oh, I like this song. I was like 7 years old or something, and just listening to it, I was just like, oh man, it's so bright. It makes me think of spring every time. And just the story of him being in Eric Clapton's, was they at Eric Clapton's garden, right? They're at his garden, and he just kind of came to him, and then he brings it in the studio. He's like, here's this song for you, and then he plays it, and it's just so beautiful. It's so catchy. It's so upbeat. I mean, just one of the best like pop songs ever. I mean, how can you top Here Comes the Sun? Well, obviously you can on this album, but even so, it has to be my second favorite on there. But even so, it's like you go from Something to one of the most disarming transition into Maxwell Silver Hammer, which is still so bizarre. But I think one of my friends back in the day, he said the Beatles were the only group that were writing like love ballads and stuff, and then within 5 years started talking about hammer murderers and did not lose a single fan, which I think is just such a brilliant observation, because it's just Paul, and I know they hated playing on it, but it's such a fun song. It's so kooky with it. Bang, bang, Maxwell silver hammer came down upon his head, and yet it's just another example why Paul McCartney is such a perfectionist in the best way possible, especially on this album, even though, you know, they didn't appreciate it. I know we all do. And so basically, you know, you had that. And then, of course, I mean, Oh Darling, which is maybe Paul McCartney's best vocal performance ever, when he just then you told me, you know, it's just incredible. One of the greatest singers, I think the greatest singer in the Beatles, though I know a lot of people say John Lennon, but for my money, it's Paul McCartney. Paul's my favorite Beatle, if you haven't picked up at this point in time. But yeah, man, and George following close behind. But even so, I mean, as it was on your not to spoil your list, but I think it's safe to say, because it was the number 100 on the top one on Johnny Radio's top 100 Beatles songs, Octopuses Garden, which Ringo wrote and George helped him out with, and it's just such a fun song. My favorite Ringo song, after with a little help from my friends, but obviously the best song he's written, at least that I know. And I mean, and then you have, which I think is maybe, to say this is the weakest song on the album is kind of crazy, but I Want You, She's So Heavy. I just think it's a little long, but then by the end, just that powerful, that, you know, and just all the there's so much going on in the mix. It's so intense and so grind, and then just that sudden cutoff on the A side. It's just, I don't know, I was listening again,
and the transition to go into Here Comes the Sun is like just amazing.
Go from something, She's So Heavy, literally, and then, you know, right into that. It's just an absolute another reason why the Beatles were just so diverse in their musicality and whatnot. But obviously, I mean, I'm just looking at the back here, making sure I didn't forget anything. It looks like I didn't. But then obviously you start the medley with You Never Give Me Your Money, which is another beautiful Paul song. But then the way, I mean, and I know John said that he wasn't a fan of this, this symphony, you know, bowl or whatever. But like when you listen to Sun King, the way that they interpolate, and I forgot to mention Because, which is one of the most mind-blowing songs. I think when it comes to vocal harmonies, there's not a better Beatles song in the book. It is just unbelievable. You know, it's just, because the sky is blue, it makes me cry, you know, and just the lyricism contrasting something so positive and creating, you know, using that play on words of the blue, you know, for feeling down and trying to, you know, creating a whole other emotion out of it. It's just so trippy. It's so ethereal. Listening again while, you know, putting my list together for your top 100 list, I was just like, oh my goodness, this is one of their best songs, and it's not even the best song on this album, which is, it's just blows my mind. But it, like in the song, but yeah, the way it transitions into you know, the way Sun King melds the melodies, the harmonies of Because and the lyrics of Here Comes the Sun creates such a powerful moment in music. It's very subtle, but it just sticks out so much, because it feels like a continuation of those songs. And then of course you get like She Came In Through the Bathroom Window, which is such a bizarre story, but it works so well. And then of course Mean Mr. Mustard, Polythene Pam, all that, very brief, but yet they're so much fun, and just the transitions are so flawless. Was this all done in one take? It couldn't have been done, not all of it, but some of it sounds
I'm not
like
sure, but you would think so, the way they flow into each other, you know, it's just like perfect.
But yeah, I mean, just even so, like the way it keeps building and building. Golden Slumbers, it's very brief, but just such an amazing and memorable Paul McCartney ballad. And then you get into Boy, You're gonna carry that way. You know, it's just like all of them coming together, all of them getting the songwriting credit, and then the with the horns bringing in You Never Give Me Your Money, and then bringing it back to an earlier song. I forgot which one it was. The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All good children
go
to
to
heaven.
heaven. Yeah.
And then just bringing into the end with, oh yeah, all right, oh, you're gonna be in my dreams. And then you get that solo from Ringo, which another example. I do not know how you can listen to this album and not think Ringo is not one of the best drummers of all time, because he absolutely is. He's still killing it to this day. And then you get the end, which I think that last statement where it says, and in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make. I don't think there's anything that epitomizes what the Beatles were more than that statement. And then of course Her Majesty, which, you know, it's fun. But yeah, man, I mean, what can I say about this album? This really kind of set the groundwork. I wish I had listened to the Beatles in order from the beginning, because obviously I'd listened to this before I heard Please Please Me. But then again, I guess I'm not that upset about it, because this really was such a pivotal moment in my life when it came to music, because I knew just even like a year or so down the line that I would be really be getting into all this great music and really going down the rabbit hole and kind of like becoming kind of, I'd like to pride myself as a connoisseur on music history, because I always tried to you know, educate myself, and I really think Abbey Road was the start of it all. And just look at that, to me, especially, and we barely even talked about the cover of Dark Side of the Moon, because we were talking about the music, the two most iconic album covers of all time. I think by far the two most iconic albums of all time. But Abbey Road is just something, even though it doesn't have that cohesion necessarily like Dark Side of the Moon does all the way through. I just think that that medley makes it the greatest album of all time, and really the greatest achievement in popular music. Yet again, proof that and I think we all agree why the Beatles are the greatest band of all time. I mean, it's hard to argue anything else.
Same. Yeah, you said it all, man. And yeah, Abbey Road is also my favorite Beatles album. And just like you, it was my proper introduction to the band, because up until that point, I was like a casual fan. I knew their singles and stuff, but I hadn't really listened to that many of their albums front to back. And a friend of mine was like, wait, you haven't listened to Abbey Road, like the whole thing? And I was like, no. And so I did. And then, yeah, the second, the medley finish, I was just like mind blown. And then I went through their entire catalog backwards and then forwards again.
Okay.
It was like, yeah. And I think I went from that to like the White Album after, which I also love. But yeah, I mean, if I were to sum this up, it would be a phrase from You Never Give Me Your Money, which is, oh, that magic feeling. Like, this album has like this magic aura to it that I can't even quite put into words, but not just the medley and how the songs flow into each other, and the amazing transitions, like the one from She's So Heavy into Here Comes the Sun. It's just like, this really feels like almost like a greatest hits album, and it's their final album. There's not a better final album from any band or artist that I can think of. And the Beatles, it just shows their legacy. I mean, they just kept getting better as they went. It was like, if it was a stock chart, it would just look like that,
Right.
Just incredible. And, obviously Let It Be was released after, but it was recorded before Abbey Road. So this I consider to be their swan song, and just incredible, man. And like you said, the iconic album cover, which I had the honor to walk across Abbey Road myself.
No kidding.
And, this was years ago when I was around your age, actually, 21, 22 maybe. Great trip, man. And Liverpool, we did the whole the magical mystery tour bus, they call it, that goes through, like, we saw Strawberry Fields, and there's like a little statue for Eleanor Rigby, and the Cavern Club, all that stuff. But it was amazing. But yeah, man, this album totally deserves to be number one. I'm just gonna say this, man. I like your top 100 better than the Johnny Radio top 100.
Really?
Well, just for the simple fact that Abbey Road came in above Dark Side, which I love both equally, but I think Abbey Road has the edge for me personally.
Yeah.
Because had I not listened to Abbey Road, I may not have listened to Dark Side. Like,
sure,
it started my trajectory as well into just classic music. Kindred spirits, man. What can I say?
No, and that's funny you mentioned that, because like, man, we'll talk about it in a little bit, because obviously I want to reflect on it. But this is crazy how this lined up, because this was how it was even before I put my list on, and that's my 1 and 2.
Yeah.
So you know, that's crazy. Nice. Yeah, you feel the same exact way. It's crazy.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really happy that these 2 albums are where they are. I feel like they definitely deserve to be number 1 and 2.
No.
And I could understand if they change spots too. But yeah, I mean, sure. Abbey Road, one of, if not the most iconic album cover of all time.
It is the best.
You know, the first half of the album is just, like you said, like a greatest hits compilation. Here Comes the Sun is probably my favorite Beatles song. Something, Oh Darling, you know, Come Together, just all those songs. And then the second half, you got that awesome medley. And even if it isn't really cohesive, doesn't tell like a cohesive story, it all flows together so well. And I love the end part of that medley the most, like I'd say from Golden Slumbers to the end is just fantastic. Yeah, probably the greatest swan song to any band,
undoubtedly.
Ever.
Undoubtedly. And it's good that you mentioned George Martin earlier, John, because the thing is, I mean, especially when we're talking about Eleanor Rigby, he was really the mastermind behind that song. But the fact that they came back to do this album, and he's like, all right, you know, cut all the crap, let's just make a great record, really shows that he was the fifth Beatle. I mean, without George Martin, we wouldn't even have the Beatles. And sometimes I just don't think he gets all the credit he truly deserves. But in my book, the greatest producer of all time, because it definitely the most influential. And with all respect to like Kanye and Dr. Dre and Brian Wilson, I mean, this guy was the one that really kicked things to a whole other level. Because I mean, even you listen to like Little Richard or Chuck Berry or Buddy Holly, like all that stuff, like the records, not all of the songs are very clean or pristine. They're kind of muddy because they didn't have the technology, but you know, just really what George Martin was able to pull out of these machines and out of the orchestration. You know, he was such a brilliant arranger, just incredible. And I think that nothing really says that more than this album, and especially at number one. Obviously, I think this is this is very interesting to look at this, because and this is why I kind of want to look back at it and ask you guys what, you know, about the list overall, kind of like your thoughts and impressions on it.
Well, like I said before, the diversity is great on the list. I love that. And there could have been, you know, maybe even a little more hip hop in there, honestly, but and I wish there was more on the Johnny Radio Top 100 as well. But you know, as far as the classics are concerned, there's really not that many surprises. I mean, some were higher than others, but this, I think, especially if you compare to the Rolling Stone Top 500 or whatever they call it now, it's no contest, man. This is the pure, true top 100 that everyone that everyone needs. And just looking at this top 5 on the screen right now, I mean, such a cool mix. I mean, Beach Boys, Joni Mitchell, Michael Jackson, Pink Floyd, and the Beatles. You can't get more iconic than that. And everything that's led up to it. I mean, there may have been on the entire top 100, like maybe 1 or 2 questionable albums. I think that was the same thing for mine. Yeah, Calvin Harris, right? I was like, who the hell is that? I don't even know.
That wasn't even on year-end list.
Right.
You know,
but that's bound to happen, man. But yeah, like Rolling Stone, I mean, you had like questionable stuff in the top 10. So, I don't even know what's happening with that publication anymore these days, but I get they're trying to please like the wrong people, I guess. I don't know.
Maybe.
But I can't say enough, man. You did such a great job with this. All around the presentation, obviously you have a great circle of people that voted. Because I just think it turned out great.
No, well, thank you, man. I really appreciate it. Because because it's interesting, especially like when you compare it to your list. I think in some sense I appreciate the diversity more on this list. But like some like the albums on your list, I think you had more classics because you look at some of the stuff that was left off. We don't have Sign of the Times. We don't have Let It Bleed. How did Let It Bleed not make the like? That's crazy to me. And I know you're not like a huge Springsteen fan, but the fact that Born to Run, I mean, just from an iconic standpoint, the fact that it was like 91, and it was below like Watch the Throne or whatever. I don't really understand like how that is even possible. And then we mentioned some other stuff that's on there that might be a little too high or a little too low. But that's it would be interesting. This is why I wanted to do this list. Well, actually, you know what, Zach? I'll let you say. What do you think overall?
I just wanted to add, not only the diversity of the different genres of music I thought was nice, but I also thought that there was a good representation. I mean, there was a lot of 60s and 70s albums.
Oh yeah.
But I thought there was some good representation from every decade. Like you got 80s albums, 90s albums, and you even had some 2000s and 2010s.
I mean, one in the top 10 even.
Yeah.
So you know that, and I think that says a lot about that record, obviously. But no, and I think that's the other thing, because you look at because I mean, there's just like 4 albums from like 1991 or something, all the grunge and just whatever else came out that year, like shoegaze. And but it would be interesting, I think, because I think there's stuff about the Rolling Stone list I like better than this, especially how objectively there's more classics that, because obviously there's no Aretha Franklin on this list. There's no obviously, I mean, not necessarily that she needs to be in the top 100, but like Taylor Swift, I'm a big fan of. And like there's so many albums that kind of had just missed out, and you got stuff like The Weeknd's last album that was put on there, which I thought was, I still have to listen to The Weeknd, but I thought it was a little strange that it kind of made the spot that it did. And that's not to knock the album necessarily, but I don't know. Just from my understanding, I don't think it's going to be a watershed moment. Like, let's say something that came out a couple years ago, like When We All Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go? I'd understand if that made the list, because I think it already has kind of like this cultural surge behind it. And I think it's a phenomenal record. I think you all know at this point I love Billie Eilish, but but I couldn't put it on my list over a lot of these classics on here. So it would be really interesting to kind of mix and mash everything, because look at the top 5 itself, the top 3 albums specifically, because I think Thriller, I think it's also a kind of indication of what is the most popular, because I think those top 3 choices are the most popular albums of all time, and also just incredible, especially the first 2 are some of the best. So objectively speaking, yes, absolutely. But I also think too, like, a lot of that popularity factor figured in, because like why did Damn make the list and not Good Kid, Mad City? I know you were saying I'm going to be disappointed.
I was a little bit disappointed in that. Yeah,
but that's the thing, it was very, and I think Good Kid, Mad City should have been on there as opposed to Damn, which I talked about. I love the album, but Good Kid, Mad City was yet again another conceptual genius of a project, and that was just on the outside of the top 100, if you were wondering, because obviously there was a lot of Kendrick, comparatively speaking, but obviously, it would be interesting to mix and match some of the choices on Rolling Stone list, move them above, move them below, take a couple of stuff off of here that isn't necessarily worthy of being held to that classic level. And I think it would be an amazing list, and especially some of the stuff that was on your list to throw that in there, and just kind of, it would be amazing to kind of bring it all together. But I also think this proves how hard it is to make an objective list, because obviously there's going to be stuff like 18 months or like that isn't necessarily objectively the best, but people loved it, so they threw it on the list. And I think that was the problem with the Rolling Stone list, for a lot of it, because a lot of people downvoted the Beatles because they they weren't being necessarily objective. They wanted to represent other artists, which I understand, but it really felt like there was a lot of bias going in there and kind of saying, oh, we're going to do this because this reason and this reason. And not to say that they aren't great picks overall, especially in the top 100, though. I get he's influential, but I probably would take Drake out of the top 100. Sorry, guys.
Sure,
but,
yeah.
But yet again, I mean, there's stuff that's missing here that I can't, that I mentioned that I don't really, I can't turn my eye away from. But I think overall, I just enjoyed this list so much, and I'm really glad that you guys love it. And thank you guys for participating. Thank you for everybody who participated in this, because this was just such a fun way to kind of get the channel up and going again, especially after leaving it for a couple years and just doing exclusively movie reviews, to kind of bring it back with this almost a statement of sorts, a manifesto, if you will, a creative manifesto on YouTube. I just think it was just so much fun to put together, and also thank you guys for joining me in this episode. I couldn't have asked for a better episode, especially talking about these albums. I mean, I'd say, I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 half of these top 10 are in my top 10 favorite albums. So, I think it goes to show. And the crazy thing about, I think I said Sgt. Pepper was above Revolver by like 2 points, right? Like that's how close it was.
Right.
So
that's so cool, man.
Yeah. It's
yeah.
Just
and
awesome.
no list is perfect. Obviously,
right.
There's always going to be some weird objective and subjective things going on, but for the first time out doing one of these, man, you knocked it out of the park. Seriously, man.
Thank you.
I give your top 100 a 100.
maybe how about a 85? I'll take that. That's a good
round it up.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, once again, thank you guys for joining me in this episode, and I had so much fun doing this. So I'm sure we're gonna be able to do this all again. And for the people who don't know, where can they find you, John?
You can find me on JOHNNY RADIO. So youtube.com/C/JOHNNY RADIO. We do top hundreds now, top fives every Friday, album reviews, and much more. So yeah, thank you so much for the plug, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I mean, hey guys, I gotta tell you, I mean, I've been watching this guy's channel for over a year. I think it was the first video I saw was the top 5 Stevie Wonder songs, because that was when I was really getting Stevie Wonder. And he has so much great content, always doing something every week, almost every few days, really. There's so much content on there, so please go subscribe to his channel. I wouldn't be telling you otherwise. I'm not one of those fake people who are going to just tell you to check something out just to do it, but really this guy's channel is awesome. And the fact that we're here right now, and newfound friendship is just so great. So I'm so happy that you're here. And Zach, I mean, is there any place anybody can find you?
I mean, I don't have my own show or anything, but I have Facebook, Instagram at Zach Burdick. If you want to follow me, you can.
And album of the year, right? If you guys are on there,
album of the year too. Yeah.
Sweet.
So yeah, I mean, once again, guys, thank you for this. I just really love doing this, and we'll be back at you soon. I guarantee it. So let me just stop the screen here. What else can I say? Thank you guys for coming, and thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you next time.